Hi there, I'm Karen Marie. This is Sunday, April 19th, 2020, and I am down at Lake Travis in Austin, Texas. See? So last week, I didn't get to record my Psyched-Up video till the end of the day because we're on lockdown and my almost 17 and my 22-year-old were making too much noise all day long for me to be able to record a video in lockdown. So today, I felt guided to leave the house and try to find a beautiful, quiet spot, although it's not been as quiet as I hoped. There's been a lot of people. We're supposedly in lockdown, but apparently we're not on lockdown if you're in a boat. So that's the story here on the lake. So I've been guided to do this video series weekly, and what I'm finding is that each week when I finish the one before I start getting guidance about I'm supposed to be guided to talk about the next week. So all this week I've been getting a whole lot of download about this video, and then I've shared that I'm a Nichiren Buddhist and I practice. I have a spiritual practice. I chant every morning and every evening. I chant at least an hour every morning, most mornings, many mornings more than that, but that's sort of my minimum to start with. And I have a little book that I set beside myself that I get my downloads then for the day. And so today I sat down this morning to chant, knowing that I was going to be recording this video today and getting more specific downloads. Of course, I've been getting them all week long, getting a whole lot of information about what I'm supposed to be talking about today. And then I sit down to chant this morning, and when I finally come up feeling like, okay, I got all the download, all right, and I look at my clock, it had been just over 3 hours that I chanted this morning. Now, this video is not going to be 3 hours long, but it is going to be a longer video than usual because I have a lot that my guys want me to cram and composite into this one video. So I've been guided to talk about two things today. One of which is the difference between what is your mind and your thoughts and what is your intuition and how that shows up. And then I have examples of how that's shown up for me. I'm a musician and songwriter. So at the end of this video, if you listen all the way through, I'm going to be playing you two different songs that I have recorded. One of which came from my brain, my creative thinking, putting thoughts and feelings together and writing a song. The other one I channeled, and which means it just came through, downloaded. That one will be the last one I play, and that one also, Malford Milligan accompanies me on background vocals on that song, and Michael Cross does the music on that one. In the first song, I'm going to be playing piano, flute, guitar, and singing. I do all the instruments on the recording that Richard Cagle did for me this past May. So those are the two songs I'm going to be playing at the end of this video as a reward for sticking with me, and also as examples of the two different kinds of writing, and examples of writing from the head and channeled writing. So that's one thing that I've been guided to talk about. The other thing, the main focus of the conversation and everything weaved in and around this is relationships. And what I've learned about relationships personally, and what I've learned about them through doing readings for others. And I took lots of notes this morning, got a download, thought, do I have to type out a script? This was a lot of information. And no, my guides were like, no, just write it all down and then go out and record it without looking at your notes. So there you go. It's going to be, there's been a template laid down, but I'll be partially channeling this. I don't know, where there's going to be a combo of coming from telling my story and weaving it in. So I have a disclaimer too, that I will be talking about a couple of my exes and my parents, and I do not mean to be intentionally hurtful to anyone. If I'm telling a painful part of my past history, it's my story. I have done my utmost to work through my baggage, to heal my wounds from childhood, from my past relationships. That said, I want to just talk about relationships in general and how I grew up. I grew up sort of Disney programmed to believe in sort of fairy tales that men had the power and women served men and were basically supposed to wait to be rescued by some fabulous men, and that make our lives be about the man, and that men had the power and that women didn't, and that the purpose of life on this planet was to live happily ever after with your soulmate. That's sort of the rap I gathered So, couple problems with that. I have deduced at this point that that is nowhere near what we're doing here on this planet. It's not the goal and the accolades for having a successful relationship, having a long-term relationship that goes from high school till you're in your hundreds together. I mean, yes, that's a successful attempt to stay together a long term. Successful and happy are different things. What I'm seeing in my psychic work and just personally is that there's very few people on this planet that are even happy, period. Put a dot in it, right? Fork in it. In relationships, very few people are actually really happy in their relationships. A lot more are content. A lot more are settling. And there's a whole lot of people that are miserable, as you know what, and staying in their relationships for whatever reasons they're telling themselves they have to, or that they can't get out of, or whatever. So I believe that the purpose of life on this planet is to grow and evolve as a soul. We don't get to take our husband, our wife, our kids, our property, our money in our bank account. None of that goes with us when we cross out of this body. What does go with us is anything we've learned and evolved as our soul lessons. We get to take that with us. So a successful relationship is one in which you've learned something and you've grown. So I think a lot of people dog themselves about having unsuccessful relationships or relationships that end or whatever. We're really not wired to have relationships that just go on one thing forever. We're really more wired to explore and develop and learn this teaching from that person and this lesson from that person and this from that, right? Not that you can't find that ideal situation and have it all in one package. It's still an ideal in our society that's the goal to shoot for. And what I've learned along the way is that once you get happy and you feel love right now, it's like that, bam. It's better than finding the ideal person. And that's the place I feel like I'm at today, is I've been single for 2.5 years now. First time in my life that I spent a period of time being single. I've gone out on lots of dates. I'm vetting. I'm very clear about what kind of person I'm looking for and what kind of qualities and characteristics I want that person to have. I know that I need someone who can see me clearly, and is someone who's been chanting for 3.5 decades and been a psychic for 3 decades too. Like, it's a special person that's going to be able to see me and understand me and get me. And so when I find people in my life that seem to do that, they're my soul tribe. And that's what I believe, that there's not necessarily one person out there that's your soul mate, but there's a tribe of people that we incarnate with again and again and again, and all these different varieties of connections in our relationships. Not always just the happily ever after scene. There'll be all kinds of out picturings of what that looks like from lifetime to lifetime, the souls that we have deep connections with. And when you meet a soul that you've been with in more than one lifetime, you recognize it with your life on some level, if you're awake at all. Sometimes it's a very, very strong positive reaction, like, oh my God, I know you. Sometimes it's a very, very strong negative reaction, and for whatever reason, you hate that person from sight. It's going to be karma. Like, why would you hate someone you've never seen or you don't know? That's like karma, right? So, all right. So I grew up with feeling like I didn't get loved. That's basically, a long story short, with my childhood. My mom was cold and distant and involved in teaching her piano students. She's a piano teacher. So I've been a musician from the womb, growing up with her teaching piano lessons my whole life, usually after school or whatever. And then my dad was an upwardly mobile oil executive who kept to himself a lot and was OCD and had a trigger temper. So you knew not to step on his last nerve or do anything that would get him to explode in your face. And so I do have a few warm memories from my childhood where I felt cherished and adored, but all 3 of them were with my dad, and they were all wrapped around activities that he liked. Feigning interest in duck hunting so I could go with him at 4 a.m. to sit and freeze my ass off at a duck blind. Football. Now, I did come to love football. I was sitting next to him on the couch, and ask him questions about the game, and he would light up at my interest in football. He had played football in college and that was one of his loves. And so I became to love football as well. That became a genuine love of mine as well, but it was his love first. And then church. We grew up Episcopal, and he would be his warmest and most approachable on Sundays. And especially if we were at one of the churches that we were passing the peace and hugging everybody, he'd be all loved up, and I could kind of snuggle up next to him and sneak in under his arm and get what would be the closest to a hug that I got. I can't ever remember either of my parents ever telling me they loved me as a kid. I would get love mom or love dad on cards kind of thing. Very cold and sterile is how I felt. What my mother harbored negative thoughts and feelings towards me. I'm just going to cut to the chase and I had it confirmed by a friend of hers that later just said, oh yeah, your mom talked about you negatively behind your back all the time, which is what I felt as a child. You don't have any validation for that. You can just feel if your parent doesn't really like you, or you're pushing their buttons and they're having a negative emotional reaction to you, and you know what you've done. Like, that's all the sort of covert wounding I had. I didn't get told, you're a shit or whatever, but I didn't get told anything positive either. I didn't get positive, like, I believe in you, like you can do it, like you're, like, I don't know. My mom wanted me to do what she thought I should do, and I was, even back then, trying to follow my intuition, even though I didn't know what that was at the time. People asked me, did you know you were psychic growing up? I had some prophetic dreams. In hindsight, I could see how empathic I was and how I would channel. All right, so here's the first thing I'm going to bring up, the channel. Like, when I later was trying to develop psychic abilities, when I discovered that I did indeed channel. When I discovered I channeled, I flashed back to the number of times in my life, and see if you don't have this similar experience, where I would be talking to someone and then all of a sudden something would just pour out of my mouth to the person, and it would be exactly what they needed to hear, and they'd be going, oh, thank you, that was exactly what I needed to hear, or whatever. And I would just feel really good inside after I would say something like that, and then knowing that I couldn't repeat myself if my life depended on it, because it didn't seem to come from my brain. So that was channeling, and I've been doing it my whole life. So my first relationship where I felt, I know you, was when I met Malfred Milligan in 1985 in Austin, Texas. I had been chanting a little over a year at that point, and I had met him through other Buddhists, is how we met initially. And from first sight, and for those of you who don't know who this person is, he's a black albino. He's a singer now, a world-renowned singer at this point. At the time I met him, he was stocking groceries at H-E-B, the local grocery store, and working on a sociology degree at UT, and was learning how to chant. From the moment I laid eyes on this black albino that I knew I had never seen before, I knew him. From the moment I saw, like, my life went, I know you. And we became just really solid friends right from the start. Like, we're talking on the phone 3-4 hours a day, because I felt seen and heard and understood by him, and it was just such a deep, dear friendship and connection. Now, I didn't feel anything more than Buddhist brother connection with him when I first met him. I felt called to being his friend and to love him unconditionally. He had his story, without revealing, trying to keep his privacy as much as I can, was one of the most horrifics I've heard in terms of childhood stories. Like, just, you can use your worst case scenario, and that, like, his story was really bad. So I just had all this compassion in the world for him when I met him, and I began to hear his story and how wounded he was, and just felt compelled, oh, this man really needs someone to love him unconditionally, no matter what. And so early in our relationship, I made a deep vow to love him unconditionally, no matter what, because I knew he needed to be loved like that. Now, loving unconditionally is not loving because you're loving hoping you get something back. It's loving because you choose to make a vow to love. In Buddhism, we talk a lot about making a vow. In Buddhism, prayer isn't like begging the divine to help. It's making a vow. I'm going to break through this karma. I'm going to shift this stuff. I'm going to get clarity around this. I'm going to have some wisdom and insight. It's not about asking to be rescued from the divine either. And so, but I knew that I was supposed to help him. Like, I just felt called to him in a way I'd never felt called to him. I was not interested in being in a personal relationship with him as a boyfriend. In fact, when I married my first husband, Malford Milligan was the best man at the wedding because he was my best friend and my husband, who is from Morocco, and I had talked into marrying me because his visa had expired, and I had thought, well, I mean, I didn't have to talk him. He was in love with me too, but it was my bright idea that we get married after not knowing each other for 5 weeks. And Malford was like, yes, you should do it. He was my best friend, giving me, yes, you should do it. Years later, he told me he was in love with me, and it was like the hardest day in his life to stand up next to my husband and whatever. So this is the kind of karma you have with someone you've had lots of past lives with. It's deep karma, and it shows up in lots of ways. So I'm not going to go through all the vicissitudes of my relationship with Malford Milligan, but just to say that it was 4 years into our dear, deep friendship before we ever got intimately involved. And then once we got intimately involved, I thought, here's this guy that's been pining for me for 4 years. It's going to be on now. We've got this deepest connection I've ever experienced with anybody in terms of we can talk about anything and by then I'd already had a number of past life flashbacks come up. That was the first time I'd experienced that. Just spontaneously started having flashbacks about lifetimes we'd had together. So, and at this point, we've known each other 35 years, and I've had 18 different spontaneous flashbacks that have come up over the years about lifetimes I've had with him, right? So first time we're stepping in with each other, I'm thinking, okay, I'm ready for this now. Like, he's really done a lot of work on himself. He's been chanting for 4 years. He started performing music now. And he's really changing his life in lots of ways. And to back up a little bit, to talk about something I felt called to do, and to tie in my first psychic vision that I've ever had for anybody else. So right in our first days of meeting each other, we were over at his apartment one day, and we were listening to records. We were talking about our favorite musicians. And I can't remember if it was a Prince album or a Stevie Wonder, I think it was Prince, that he started singing along with as he put on. When he started singing along with this record, all of a sudden I had a vision, unlike anything I'd ever had, where I saw him singing in front of like a crowd of people, like Madison Square Garden, kind of like a crowd of people. And I just knew that he was supposed to be a singer. Now, I never had a psychic vision for anyone like that. I didn't know that I was psychic at that point. It was before I started my professional career. I'd just been chanting, a couple years maybe at that point. So I'd started to notice that my abilities seemed to be heightened. And then meeting Malford was like all this click, 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 of past life stuff bubbling up, and, a lot of information that I was getting. So anyway, long story short, our pattern, the karma in our relationship was that we would get close. I would step in and say yes to him, and he would push me away. And every time he pushed me away, he would tell me, I just can't do relationships. And every time I would find out he'd already started up another relationship with someone else who had then turned around and badmouthed me it's crazy how many women had cray-cray stories about things I said or did to them that were just made up lies that he believed. Again, karma. That happens when you have a karmic relationship with someone 4 different times. I had friends that worked their way to him through me. First one was a girlfriend, before I ever got intimately involved with him, was a girlfriend I knew from work who worked her way through me and got intimately involved with him. And it was like all kinds of icky boundaries all over the place. Like, who does it to like we were just best friends. That's when I knew that I had feelings that were more than friends for him, was when I got stirred up by my friend, work. It just felt inappropriate, and boundaries felt, ugh. So, boundaries. That's one of my key issues that I've learned in relationships. Now, my rising sign is Libra. I'm a 0 degrees Libra rising. 0 in any sign. If you've got a 0 degree, or you're a 10 or a 20, you've got the 0 in it, and your issues will be boundaries. And setting boundaries, and setting clear boundaries. And wherever it shows up, it's going to be with your life. So my whole life, and with relationships, one of my lessons is learning to set clear boundaries. It's also been learning to listen to my intuition rather than talk myself into the rational mind. So I talked myself into 2 marriages. With Malford, it was different. I was feeling called into this relationship when I first met him. and I got this vision for him singing, I knew it was my job to keep inspiring him because he had shitty self-talk. So did I at the time, but I felt compelled to like every day be in his ear, like, yeah, well, all right, Mr. Rockstar, or, you know, you're supposed to be singing, and, you know, but he was not doing anything towards that at that point. In fact, when I asked him, did you ever want to sing? He said, well, I used to like to sing in church. I'm like, no, that's not what I'm talking about. That's not what I'm saying. So I was already singing and performing. I played 3 instruments. I was already singing and writing, playing all 3 of my instruments. I wasn't doing it professionally at the time. I had a friend that had a little 4-track, and Russ Smith, and he lived in a clothing optional complex on Manor Road. If any old Austinites remember the clothing optional complex on Manor Road, fun place to be in the early 80s in Austin, Texas. So, but Russ lived there, and so I was going over one day to use his little 4-track. He was going to record a song I'd written, right? Malford was tagging along with me to support me as my best friend in recording this song. So I did. I recorded a song called Empty Pages. Malford sat and enjoyed, like, you know, a holiday process. And then afterwards, Russ, who had recorded my music, and Ray, his roommate, and Malford and I sat around, chatted for hours. And I was like, man, you guys need to sit together and jam, because Malford's supposed to be a singer and he could really use some musicians to work with. So they did. They started jamming together and playing together all the time. They recorded some music that were called themselves The Cause, C-O-Z, and they played some of their music on K-A-Z-I. And then through Russ, he met Craig Ross, who ended up being the guitar player that he formed Stick People with. And so from the start, I watched his music career. I was at the very first Stick People gig at the Southern Palms, which was right off of 6th Street, and watched his whole evolution of his music career take off. And our relationship off and on, stories off and on, weaving in and out of all the other relationships that I've been having. His too, our relationship weaving in and out of all of his other relationships for quite some time. So that's kind of all I want to say about that, except that I'm really grateful that both Michael Cross and Malford Milligan are still practicing Buddhist, and that we all have chanting together in common. I met Michael through Malford. I used to take Malford, who's legally blind, to a blues night at Antone's, a blues club here in Austin, Texas. And Michael and Malford would both sing with this kick-ass band, and hardly anybody would be in the club. It would be just the amazing, best-kept secret for Austinites here in town that would go and catch. Like, Eric Johnson would pop in there, and like nobody would know he'd be there, and there'd be like 2 people there listening. It'd be like the house band, and they would tease about the money they got paid would be Antone's bucks, because they were lucky if they went home with a $20 bill in their pocket from those nights. But they enjoyed jamming with these high caliber musicians. It's where I met Gary Clark Jr. It's where I met the Peterson brothers coming up to jam on these Blues Monday nights. So Malford and Michael were both vocalists, and they would often switch off a set. Michael would sing a set, and then Malford, or vice versa. And so I would be driving Malford to a lot of these gigs, and met Michael. And from the first time I met him, I started inviting him to come join us for Buddhist meetings, which is something I'll do if I get a sense that someone might be interested in Buddhism. So, and then at the time, Malford and I were district leaders together after having broken up with a round. And I know there's at least 6 rounds of More Than Friends in the 35 years. And then we would always do a really good job of eventually getting to where we were great friends again and just focused on our Buddhist practice. And we would call that. And so like that was part of our cycle too, is like, even though he would dump me and go off and be with some other woman who ended up usually being crazy, he would end up coming back, apologizing. Oh, I'm so sorry. Like, can we try it again? Da, da, da. You do this pattern. I don't want to do this pattern with you. I promise. This was the last round. Okay, same pattern. This time, he ended up marrying the woman he started a relationship with in the middle of ours, So, I mean, karma's karma. I mean, I personally don't feel like starting a relationship inside another relationship sets a very good karmic cause. And that's all I'm going to say on that topic, right? I knew that we really shouldn't have stepped in the last round. I knew he didn't meet my needs in some ways that were really important, but I knew that my heart had to give him one more try. And that I know that over 35 years, that even though he has jacked me around in some really shitty ways, that I have chosen to love him unconditionally, no matter what. Now, I've learned to set up boundaries about what I will and won't deal with, But hands down, I know I love this soul. I've worked through, I feel like my side of the karmic slate is clean when it comes to our relationship and my take on things. My ex-fiance, Michael, right? Okay, so when we got together, Malford and I had been exes. They were music, were in the same music circles in Austin, Texas. They'd worked on each other's projects a lot. In fact, the night that there was a ping from me and Michael was a night I had taken Malford up to Roscoe Beck's record release, because Roscoe Beck had both Michael and Malford record it on his record, and so they were both there that night. So Michael came across my radar when, after begging Malford for months to cough up his email address so I could send him invites to our Buddhist meetings, and he finally did, Michael walked up into a Buddhist meeting. Now, he had encountered another musician, Courtney Aldane, who I had introduced to Buddhism and had been practicing. So Michael first chanted with Courtney, but Courtney was someone I introduced to the Buddhist practice with. And one of the rounds that Malford and I were a couple is when Courtney and his wife at the time, Dee, started chanting, and Malford was very much part of his first days of his practice. So I have many, many wonderful memories of chanting with Malford and Michael together, the three of us, at Malford's house, at my house, like it's at the Buddha Center. And I always felt that no matter what else has gone down in our relationships, that this trumps everything. Like, that having the experience of being us, all three of us, chanting together in unison and harmony. I mean, first of all, these guys are two of the best male vocalists on the planet, I think, in this town anyway. And to have the fortune to be able to do music with both of them was quite something for me. But to chant with them is just heavenly. I wish I had recorded it and had copies of it. I don't. So during my relationship with Michael, we were recording in my living room, and we were going to record a song that Malford and I had wrote when I was married to my first husband. It's called Silent Sounds, and it was a song about our love story and our friendship. That's a love story, basically, with me and Malford. And so Malford had come over this day to record Silent Sounds, put his vocals down on Silent Sounds. So, but he was like, what have y'all been working on today? And so we played him a song that I wrote called Bring Out the Buddha. Now, a backstory on this song. Michael and I had written a bunch of music when we first got together. Like, that was one of the things at the beginning of our relationship, is like right from the start we were writing music together, which like drew me in. And for the first time in my life, he's like, we should do music together. And after being a musician my entire life, I finally started doing music professionally with Michael. We formed a music duo. We called ourselves Dharma Rain. And so, I mean, that's one of the biggest benefits that I had. My takeaway from my relationship with Michael is that, he helped me get over the hump to be a professional. Now, I have 6 children who I have homeschooled, and the last one is going to be 17 on Thursday. So I'm still got that hat on. So, and that's the explanation that I give to why I haven't put a lot of energy into my music, because how many things can I do at once, right? I've got 6 children. I'm homeschooling them. I'm doing my psychic work on the side. I'm very active in my Buddhist practice and my Buddhist organization. And when am I going to have time to do music? Like, I do music to sing my kids to sleep at night. I write songs when I need to work through emotions or process something. That's what I used music for until I got together with Michael. So we had done all this music, and I knew that we needed to have a title song for our CD that we were putting together. And so in our Buddhist practice, we talk about the fact that everyone has a Buddha nature. We all have the Buddha within. And so I got the idea that it'd be a great song to write, Bring Out the Buddha. Like, talking about how we bring out the Buddha. Like, that was just my idea, Bring Out the Buddha. So I wrote the name, the title, and I put it on my Buddhist altar, and I just chanted over it for a couple of weeks. Like, I didn't want it to come from my brain. I didn't want this to be a song that I figured out because of what I know about Buddhism, and I'm going to put some of the principles of Buddhism in the lyrics of the song, and which I've done. Some great songs I've written in that way. This was different. I knew I wanted this song to be channeled. So I set down the intention to write Bring Out the Buddha, and about 2 weeks after I had been chanting over it, I'm chanting, and all of a sudden I get the download. I have to run and grab paper to get the lyrics that are pouring out of me. I get this song a cappella. Most of my music I have written on the guitar. I've written a few things on the piano, but they usually come with me getting the melody first on the guitar, and then I wrap the lyrics around the music. That's one of the ways I've written from the brain, right? And often I will get a melody as well and have channeled lyrics come along with that later. That's also happened. So this song, Bring Out the Buddha, came through. I wrote it a cappella. Everybody has a Buddha within. Everybody has some demons, my friend. That's how it started, right? So, and then since I'm with Michael, this exceptional musician at the time, all I had to do was, him was like, okay, I'm gonna sing you this song I got. It has a really stanky bass line. Like, I was just like, and he's like, okay, and like, what about this? So like, yes, okay, yes, that's it. And so that's how we constructed the song, right? So, and then Malford wanted to hear Bring Out the Buddha, and he listens to we had laid down almost everything on it. Michael plays all the instruments on it. I don't play any instruments on this. I play the altar bell. You'll hear an altar bell on it. I play that. And when Malford hears it, he says, I want to lay down some vocals on this, if y'all don't mind. And we're both like we would mind. Yeah, go ahead, lay them down. So we did. And so we recorded we've recorded 2 CDs, mastered the first one. So this song was part of the mastered CD. Did not master the second one, never released any of it. So this is a song we've not released. I will be releasing a solo album this year that will include this song and others that I co-wrote with Malford and Michael. The whole song's going to be my originals, though. There won't be a song on the album that's not one of my originals or one that I co-wrote with someone. So that's what I'm going to say about today. That's all I kind of get about my relationship story, what I've learned, what I've gathered. It's important to listen to your gut, listen to your heart, and don't override your intuition. Okay, so that's another thing I'm going to say. When it came to my relationship with Michael, the music was so beautiful. The spiritual practice was awesome. Lots of parts about the personal connection weren't working for me. I won't go into details. My gut, I was like in limbo so much of the time, feeling like 50% of the relationship really rocked and 50% of the relationship really sucked, and I didn't know how to extricate, because I did feel guided in certain ways about that relationship, and I couldn't figure it out on others, and like, it was like crazy. I couldn't, and I was getting intuitive signals. My brain was just afraid to trust what I was getting intuitively, trust my gut, bottom line, that I could trust my gut. And so we were together for 9.5 years. I'm going to walk back to my car where I have to be to play these songs for